I think the manner in which the government has handled the Dáil in this debate has been shameful and shocking, given the fact that there has been a lack of any transparency and honesty in the presentation of the facts, and particularly in terms as they relate to workers. And it is now imperative, given the revelations contained in the NIRIS report, that the government would suspend today's debate and vote and allow Dáil deputies to tease these issues through properly at the Transport and Oireachtas Committee. And the problem for the government is it always prefers spin more than substance. It's always about telling a good news story as opposed to perhaps the realities that are inevitably down the line following the sale of this 25.1% share. And that's revealed very much in the NIRIS report. And the Taoiseach yesterday said he wasn't aware of it, he had no knowledge of it. And I would ask the Minister, had he any knowledge of it? And did the Board of Aer Lingus and did the executives in Aer Lingus show this report to the Minister? And did the Minister take the decision to recommend the sale of Aer Lingus without any inkling or knowledge of this report, or was he aware of it? Because it's quite significant. And despite what was said this morning in radio by the acting CEO, or the CEO of Aer Lingus, it is about staff, and it is about cost-cutting, and not just cost-cutting agreements with outsourcing companies and so on like that. Because it says Aer Lingus self-handles it. This is a quote from the report. It's comparing Aer Lingus with Welling and with EasyJet, and it's all around costs. And about seasonality and legacy staff, it says Aer Lingus self-handles at Dublin, Cork and Shannon at an average cost of €1,226 per turnaround. However, the relatively inflexible labour agreements increase this cost to 1,432 in the winter, thus adding 2.3 million to the cost base. Now, Minister, you know what that means. The inflexible labour agreements, we're going to change that. In addition, the legacy staff costs compared to EasyJet's market rates adds 12 million of costs. And it goes on. And it talks about reviewing each of these in collaboration with the commercial team could be a profit improvement opportunity. And equally, in terms of other comparisons, Aer Lingus's ground handling costs are higher than both EasyJet and Welling, 30%, 45% respectively for each turnaround. Aer Lingus self-handles at its Dublin, Cork and Shannon stations, where EasyJet and Welling are outsourced. Clear implication in that. The main challenge for Aer Lingus is to clearly review its desired product offering and define a new lean model. This can then form the basis for restructuring labour agreements to provide seasonal and daily flexibility. No wonder the letter from IAG is so meaningless. No wonder it's a classic of its kind in terms of camouflaging what really is going to happen. They can't give those commitments that the government wanted and that the government is trumpeting to the unions. Because it's in black and white in this report where this is heading. A leaner structure will help reduce self-handling costs and provide a basis for negotiating with third-party handlers, and so on. Welling, the company that Aer Lingus has been compared to, is known for having very aggressive employment contracts, the lowest in Europe alongside Wizz Air and Ryanair. EasyJet used Welling's pilot contract as a template for its Lisbon operations. Welling deliberately pays cabin crew low salaries to encourage staff turnover. Average turnover is 40%. Ideal tenure is 6 to 12 months. Welling are very good at dealing with their extreme seasonality in this way, the report says. And then in terms of pilots and per-seat pilot costs, Aer Lingus utilisation is 715 hours per pilot, EasyJet's is near 850 hours. Aer Lingus's pay structure, particularly for long-service staff, is responsible for part of the cost gap. Now, I list all of this because it's very clear where we're heading, and yet the government paints a totally different picture and doesn't tell the truth. And there should be a wider debate about this, because I accept there's part of a wider debate attached to this. But this is where but in terms of agreeing the sale of Aer Lingus and the share of the 25%, we are being asked, and the government is recommending, that we collude with this, that we go along with this without question, or without even having the decency to tell people as it is in real terms. In terms of EasyJet, in terms of fewer pilot crews, EasyJet, for example, has fewer pilot crews per aircraft, achieves a higher level of overall productivity in terms of utilisation of pilots and so on. So 2,000 pilots they have working average 850 hours per annum against Aer Lingus' 715 hours. And so the implications of that are very clear in terms of pilot conditions, in terms of conditions. But that hasn't been said at all in this debate. There's been no discussion of this. And crew costs, again, are looming largely. In terms of the maintenance issue, EasyJet addresses line maintenance seasonality by outsourcing. Aer Lingus has a fixed line maintenance cost with additional intercheck work in the winter season. Aer Lingus employs 100% licensed engineers. What does that mean? What's the implications of that? This morning we were told the report is only about costs that relate to outsourcing. You can get better deals with different companies. But the clear implication here is outsource much, much more. Get rid of your permanent staff. Get rid of your longer-term staff is coming right through this report. The more younger staff you have and all the rest of it, the lower the costs will become, and so on. And that's the nature of this report. And I think there was an onus and an obligation on government, and indeed on the board of Aer Lingus, in making its presentation to government, to have shown it this report. And is that what we want? There's no point in having low-pay commissions and all the rest of it if we're all willy-nilly just sort of going along and going along and going along. And who shouts stop? I mean, Piketty writes in his major tome and so on about the growing gap between workers' pay and corporations and so on like that. And this is a big issue in society. And I've been reflecting on this, and I think this is something we need to debate. For example, Welling has, the administrative staff supports they're saying are too high in Aer Lingus. And they're saying that the basic salary cost for managerial and support staff in Welling is low and goes through its administrative headcount versus Aer Lingus. And the point I'm making is we all now know, thanks to the publication of the Irish report, where all of this is heading. It says in terms of staff count, Aer Lingus's ground-based operational and administrative headcount equates to 55 full-time equivalent aircraft, 5 times as high as EasyJet's 11 full-time equivalents per aircraft. After adjusting for the fact that ground handling and catering are outsourced by EasyJet and there's no cargo operation, Aer Lingus has 40% more staff per aircraft than EasyJet. The cost advantage to EasyJet is €13 million. And basically then, the future means that Aer Lingus is heading really in the same trajectory as the Wellings of this world and as the EasyJets of this world. And that does have very serious implications for staff working in Aer Lingus. And instead of doing a snow job, and instead of sort of pretending all is rosy in the garden, sorry, well, it's a Cork phrase. Instead of pretending, well, basically, pretending, it's a vernacular, it's a colloquial expression. In terms of pretending that everything is rosy in the garden and that everything is going to be all right, well, very clearly that is not the real story. And I think it's quite shocking. And like the government, Taoiseach wouldn't tell us the other day in the Dáil about this. They have an orchestrated, managed PR exercise on the night before on Tuesday night, I think, come in yesterday morning, ram it through the House. I now know why. Because if you left this for a couple of days, God knows what else would come out. And people would find out the truth in relation to this. And there's a long list. It says Aer Lingus's main cost disadvantages are in cabin crew, fixed overhead. So you can imagine now you're lining up to buy this company, and you can see the bottom line for your profit. And workers are just numbers. And their terms and conditions are immaterial and inconsequential, it seems to me, in terms of any assessment of this. And we've had no discussion. And again, it says, in summing up then in the conclusions, it says, we believe that the airline should set aggressive but achievable targets for short-haul cost efficiency at a minimum of €60 million or €5 to €6 per seat. And this should in turn be coordinated with the core programme initiatives. And then it lists here all the various reductions in a table in terms of the potential savings, the minimum ones, in terms of ground handling to 2.9 million, the overseas base is 5 million. Can we drive better pilot utilisation? 1.8 million pencilled in there. The cost base for cabin crew down another 1.1 million. Hangar efficiency and heavy maintenance going to Eastern Europe. Detailed review of IT accommodation staff and so on like that. So, Minister, I don't think you've been upfront. Maybe you didn't know about this report, and if you don't, that's even more serious. And that's why you shouldn't ram this through. I mean, you rammed Irish Water through, you rammed the IRBC issue through, and now we have the same issue with Aer Lingus. No proper assessment, no proper analysis, spin over substance, and above all, I think the workers deserved to have been told the truth about the implications of this sale and where Aer Lingus is heading into the future.